Here's the moving slow. We did close a bunch of windows. Hopefully it's not. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on HawkFanatic.com. If you're on the YouTube right now, you can see Scott has made his choice for president this year. Actually, it's 1988, but we can move forward now. There's got to be a Morris the cat like Uggas at Georgia where they just keep replacing them. There has to be somebody with a Morris the cat that keeps it going this day or to this day. Where did you get that, and when did you get that?
Yeah, I got it for Christmas for my kids because we've had, as you know, two cats for a long time. Only one now, but I remember pulling up the YouTube video of some of the Morris Din Morris commercials from the '80s, and my daughter thought it was hilarious, so they got it for me for Christmas. And I thought, perfect time right before the caucuses to display my choice for president here coming up.
Yeah, one of the more memorable commercials back from our childhood. There were many of them, but that was definitely one that stood out. I am Rob Howe. That is Scott Docterman. It is Thursday, January the 11th, about 9:15 a.m. Central Time. Hopefully, everybody in our footprint of the country is doing well and safe. Obviously, some weather conditions this week and more coming tomorrow. So if you're planning on heading to Iowa City for the Iowa men's basketball game tomorrow night against Nebraska, or the women's basketball game on Saturday night against Indiana, and we'll talk about both of those games. Please be careful and check out the weather before you hit the roads, because I know it got pretty bad yesterday morning, Scott. They had to close I-80 in the Iowa City area because of crashes the night before, and they still hadn't cleared them out yet. So do those guys a favor. Those guys bust their ass trying to clear the roads, the snowplow drivers, and they don't need you out there if you don't need to be out there.
Yeah, that's for sure. On Monday night, I did On Iowa Live in Cedar Rapids, and I was up there. It hadn't started to snow yet. By the time I got out, there was probably at least an inch and a half, if not 2 inches, in like 90 minutes. And I was like, So I drove about 30 the rest of the way home. And then, the last couple of days, whether it's scooping or snow blowing, it's just been not a lot of fun in our part of the world, but this is why we live here. We know the deal.
Yeah, there's more on the way, as we say. So be aware of that if you are traveling, not only in Iowa, but extended, as I said, in the footprint of this country. It's everybody's getting hit with it. So be careful out there. We've got some football to talk about, some men's and women's basketball. We'll touch on wrestling a little bit from Tom Brand's press conference this week. Let's start with the current, which is the basketball teams, which are the basketball teams. The Iowa men play tomorrow night. We will start with the Iowa women, which played last night against Purdue at Purdue. Kind of a wonky game. It got kind of know what the word I'm looking for, kind of ragged at times. I think Purdue kind of wanted to play that way and hung in there for a while with Iowa, but Iowa, as it's done now, Scott, through most of the Big Ten Conference season, seems like it just kind of gets to that second half and puts the game away, where other teams have trouble staying in with them. It's just, I think Iowa had 49 points with like 3 minutes left in the second quarter, so obviously scoring well. I guess the only negative from last night, if you want to choose it to be a negative, is Caitlin losing her cool a little bit. And I get it. She was sticking up for a teammate in that situation when she got a technical foul. And we were watching the end of the first half, Scott. I thought the basket was good, to be honest with you. It looked to me, they had one angle where they were like from the opposite side looking at the official. His arm went up almost simultaneously as she was in her motion. So I don't know if that's a reviewable play or not, but it's unfortunate because that was amazing.
Yeah, I think it was a situation where they anticipated the foul called
Oh,
the foul.
she knew it was coming. Obviously,
Yeah,
she's very wise on her part.
right.
It speaks to her awareness.
Exactly. I mean, so the official knew it was coming. And this happens a lot in late game situations with steals
Yeah.
where officials will call foul because they know that this team's going to foul. And then all of a sudden it's actually a steal, but well, we called the foul. And I think in this case, they expected the foul to be called. They saw it in motion, but she went up with one motion herself as soon as she drew contact and hit an amazing 3-pointer. I know I tweeted invalid ... too soon because that was one of the great shots that we've seen from her. I mean, there's been a million of them, of course, but that was one, unfortunately, that got taken off the board. But I'll say, overall, I mean, did they need the points in the end? No. It's the basket. If it would have counted, would have been great. But I think more than anything, you could see the frustration with her because it's like I'd say it's like when you're driving in traffic and everybody's going about the rate of speed, but it just seems to be stop and go, and you're in a bad mood and it's kind of road ragey. I kind of thought she was a little road ragey out on the court yesterday, and just things were bothering her that normally maybe wouldn't. She had a triple double. The team won by $1 billion, but still, it was just something that she was getting agitated more easily than about any other time that in recent weeks anyway.
Yeah, and it's not. We've seen that periodically throughout her career where she just has nights like that where it seems like she and the officials are not in sync, and she's one. And it oftentimes it happens on the road, which is natural because you're not going to get a lot of the calls, even if you're Caitlin Clark when you're on the road, that you would get at home. And again, that game was just kind of wonky. They were letting them play a little bit. It was a little more physical than some games you would see. And it was frustrating for her, I think. But like you said, she ended up with her 4th triple-double of the season, which is pretty amazing. And she's done it in back-to-back games as well. Hawkeyes they're 16-1, and I lost track of how many they've won in a row. Is it 13?
Yeah, I think it's it's 13 or 14. I mean, they're 16-1. They're 5-0 in the Big Ten, and they, I think was Kansas State lost I think it was the 4th game of the season. So, yeah I think they're 13. I'd have to. Oh, wait a minute. Here, I got it here. No, that's the men. Never
mind. The one stat that's pretty, and we see it. One of the more impressive stats, I should say. That's what I'm trying to say. Iowa's 14-4 in its last 18 true road games. That's pretty impressive. That just kind of shows you how good this team has been the last few years.
And it's undefeated on the road now. And when you look, I tweeted it out when they had a graphic on Peacock last night. What the average attendance is versus what Iowa has brought to these games. And Purdue was a true road game. I mean, even though there were a lot of Iowa fans there or people who wanted to root for Caitlin Clark as much as they did Iowa. But there were, I would say, this was one of the very, because UNI was probably a split crowd. Obviously Des Moines wasn't at all. It was all Iowa. Iowa State was, I guess that's probably more of a road crowd environment. But this one was a Big Ten one where they were rooting for Purdue, and they got after her a little bit. She airballed a 3, and they really lit into her. And but the fact is that here, they're on the road and they hit 7 out of 11 3-pointers in the first quarter. That's unreal. That's good shooting, and especially because we've seen the men play at Mackey for a generation now, and they usually, I think they've come away with 1 win maybe.
And that home crowd's a little different than what they got last night. Not to take anything away from the Iowa women, but that, like you said, there were fans there for, a lot of gold 22s in the stands last night. You don't see a lot of people wearing like Keegan Murray's number in the stands when they
Yeah, there's no Luca Garza, I'm here to see Luca and my name is Luca or sign. So yeah, it's a little different. She's a phenomenon all to herself. And I think some of that, it could be the Indianapolis faction, which maybe is a little more agnostic when it comes to college basketball, but really interested because of what she could do next summer, and join the WNBA team there. And then, just to add to that, you also have Aaliyah Boston doing desk work,
Yeah,
describing it. And
she does a nice job.
she does. She and Megan McEwen's fantastic.
Very, very good.
She's
Yes.
as good as they come, whether it's on Peacock or BTN. And so I thought they had a great telecast. I really liked everything about it. And, and another really big win because Purdue hadn't lost at home yet either.
Yep.
So
Really good sign the last two games, Scott. Gabby Marshall out of the shooting slump now. She had 4 3-pointers. She's had 4 or more in back-to-back games. She's 8 of 15 in the last 2 games. So safe to say, at least for now, she's out of that slump. And that if you watched Iowa women's basketball this year, they're giving her the shot. They're like, go ahead, see if you can make it. Now, if you're scouting Iowa, you're like, all right, she's making these now. We can't just leave her wide open. It opens things up, more things up for Caitlin and Kate Martin and Hannah Stuelke. That extra scorer is huge.
If Iowa could space the floor with good perimeter shooting, they're the most dangerous team in the country when it comes to this because of the way Gabby Marshall, like when she was playing late last year and into the NCAA tournament, when you were leaving her open, forget it. She'll bury you. And then you throw on again, any kind of space for Caitlin is enough space to do whatever she wants. Kate Martin, the glue, but I think Sydney Affolter has been a really pivotal piece for this team. Caitlin's on a different planet, but if you want to go with somebody else as maybe the low-key MVP, it might be her because she's the garbage collector underneath. She's playing that role where she's a heavy rebounder, but also, has been scoring from the outside. So I think when you get her in, last year she was the backup to Kate Martin. This year she's playing more of a lead role. And then you throw some of those other role players out. I thought Kylie Fearbach had some nice plays. I thought Molly Davis, of course, has been really good. And Sharon Goodman is coming along, in the post. But, to me, Caitlin and Hannah Stuelke are the 2 all-stars. When they're going, it's hard to beat this team.
Yeah, Stuelke had a really nice block last night on a fast break that just kind of showed you her ability to run the floor, and that is something Iowa hasn't had, a big that runs the floor like that in a while. And it's just a different team makeup. You talked about a Falter, and she's not McKenna Warnock, but she has kind of that same edge. She crashes the boards, physical, won't back down. Mm-hmm. Kate Martin has that as well. They're kind of the ones that'll mix it up and get physical in there, and you need that element. But yeah, they go. Molly Davis has been just, I think, since the start of the season, just been ultra consistent. She doesn't make stupid plays. She hits shots when she's open. She runs the offense, keeps the ball moving when she's in there. That's been a heck of a find for Iowa.
Yeah, I think so. 2 years, now this is her second year. You can see the comfort level in. It was a little weird for her, I think, last year coming off the bench after having such a successful run in the MAC, but now she's really comfortable in her role. And really when she's on the floor with Caitlin, it takes pressure off Caitlin Clark because, you've got a ball handler who's as good as anybody else in the Big Ten, and it can allow Caitlin to kind of get in position to make her shots. But as good as this team's playing, and this is where it gets interesting for me, Rob, is you can still see areas that they need to improve. And when you're playing Indiana coming up this week, which we know won the Big Ten regular season title last year, or split with Iowa, has one of the top 2 or 3 players in the league in Mackenzie Holmes, who's going to create all kinds of problems for Iowa. I think there's some defensive issues that still need to be kind of determined. And I was watching this a lot with Caitlin when they don't switch very much. When somebody tries to screen, and then a lot of times she just lets her person go, and she's just kind of and then a lot of times there's an open jumper, and you got to be careful of that. And I don't know if that's just her being her, or if that's what they're saying to do. Either way, I don't think it's a winning strategy out of that position in the half court. So, and I'm not an expert, but I do see it, and I see how they've been exploited, and so I think that's something that they need to, whether they switch off the on-ball screen, or if they say you've got to fight through that and get to your player, because otherwise they're hitting open jumpers and they'll bury you from time to time. So that's something I've noticed, and I think there's some other areas that I think can be shored up. But am I nitpicking a little bit? Yeah, but this team has an expectation, and it's not. And if there's still something to work on, then I think it's worth mentioning.
Yeah, I noticed that too last night. I was watching the game with my son, and we were like, she's not fighting over the screen. She's not going under the screen. She's trying to kind of go through it, and she's going really slow around it.
Yeah.
And you can't do that. If you want to switch, you can do that, or slide under it, or see it coming and bust your ass to get over it. But she exhausts so much energy. She plays so many minutes. I kind of get that, but they need to come up with something there, because you look at it, Scott, and you say, all right, how is this? What can happen for this team to lose? What type of scenario? They're not hitting their shots. They're struggling on offense. We don't see it a lot, but it can happen. It happens to the players that, shots not falling on for everybody on a given night. Everybody's kind of off with their shot offensively. Refs are letting it be physical on that end. You're not getting the calls you might get. Can you get stops? Can you lock down on defense? That's the type of game if there is a concern or a worry with Iowa, that's the type of scenario that you have to make sure you prepare for. You're up 20 in this situation, but don't get into bad habits by not busting it on defense.
Absolutely. Because you look at the opponent coming up, Indiana. They played really poorly last night against Penn State. That's not a team that normally they would beat by. I mean, it was close for most of the game. I think they pulled away a little bit at the end, but that was probably a trap game for Indiana. They know who they're playing. They know where they're going. They know who they're playing against. So they got kind of caught looking ahead. They're not going to look ahead, because they're going to want this game, and they're going to play possession by possession really, really hard. And if you get in a situation, even if you're up by 6 with 5 minutes to go, and you're missing some shots, you got to get stops to make up for that. And you've got to be able to, again, whether it's switching on the screens, or if it's just fighting through it a little bit more. And as you said, she's kind of the superstar effect. We see it in the NBA a lot, which is, and sometimes in college ball too, where, hey, this is our primary scorer. Let's take something off on the defensive end, go pick up the weak link, in the backcourt, and while somebody else steps up, and Gabby Marshall has filled that role. But what they're going to try to do is obviously get open shots, and screens do that. And so they've got to figure out a way to, to fight through that. That's something that, and I think the other way, as you said, if they're missing shots, they could be beat. I saw it against Kansas State. They had nobody was doing anything, and Caitlin was missing shots all over the place. And Indiana is more than capable of causing them problems when it comes to that.
Yeah, no doubt. And that is Saturday night, 7:00, Carver Hawkeye Arena. If you didn't know, it is sold out, been sold out. Good luck getting tickets on the secondary market, as we were talking about before we started recording. What'd you say, Scott? 250?
Last I saw was 269 on SeatGeek. So
yeah, so if maybe you got some extra money from the holidays you're wanting to spend on, you could do a lot worse for entertainment purposes than go over there. But Fox, on Fox, not FS1. It's on Saturday night, prime time. Click Caitlin Clark, number 3 Iowa, and I think Indiana is 13 or 14, somewhere in there.
13, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, and this is obviously two of the favorites in the Big Ten. And really for Iowa, you don't want to lose this one at home
Oh,
against another contender. It's a very, very important game.
yeah, yeah, and it's developed into I mean, anytime in especially in the old school Big Ten, when you're dealing with teams like this, that when you've got teams fighting over the same piece of ground, it becomes a pretty intense rivalry. And I mean, Iowa and Indiana joined the Big Ten the same day, December 1st, 1899. So they've been competing, not in women's basketball, but in sports since then. And when you've got two teams that harbor Big Ten championship aspirations, both teams know this is on Fox. It's against an NFL game. You've got Gus Johnson that's going to be there. I mean, it's sold out, and as we said, the ticket prices are insane. They're football ticket prices, and so everybody knows the stakes here, and we remember the result last year. So, and so does Indiana, for that matter. So, I think this is a matter of the importance is pretty high. Even though we're still really just inching our way into the season. We still got 2 more months at a minimum left, but I don't know. This is as exciting mid-January game as I can remember.
Yes, and Iowa is 5-0. So obviously, doing the math, my remedial math skills, that means there are 15 Big Ten games left. Long
13.
13.
They only play 18.
They play 18. Yes. Thank you for that correction.
Yeah.
They've got Indiana tomorrow or Saturday night, excuse me. And then they come back on Tuesday, back on Peacock, whether you like it or not. Tuesday, January the 16th, this coming Tuesday, Wisconsin comes to town. And then a week from this Sunday at Ohio State, which will be another very important game, another contender in the Big Ten. So that's the next 3 here for the next week and a half or so for Iowa women's basketball. And yeah, like we said, the games at home are sold out. So you're going to have to go on the secondary market for those. And a lot of the road games now are sold out, as we saw last night in Purdue. So it's not as easy as it used to be just to hop in the car and go see them on the road either. So
yeah, there's only 2 games that haven't been sold out yet: Ohio State and Nebraska. Of any game that they've had all year, there's only 2, and on top of that, the Ohio State game's on, I think, NBC. I mean, so it's actually a major game. So you're talking about, I mean, rare air here. And
Sunday morning,
is it Sunday that they play?
21st.
Okay,
it's a Sunday on NBC. 11 a.m. So before the football playoff games, you get a little appetizer with, January Big Ten women's basketball on NBC.
That's a real.
Yeah,
used to
way, man.
Yeah, used to be that was Big Ten men's basketball would fill that void. But one last anecdote was I saw last night on Peacock where one of the commentators saw a tip jar at a local coffee shop, and for Zach Edey and Caitlin Clark, and the Caitlin Clark one was filled. I mean, what in the hell is going on here?
Transcendent, man.
Yeah.
Just a transcendent athlete. And again, I know you're the Iowa fan, the fandom wants to come up with reasons for her to come back next year. And that may happen. And if that's what she wants and what she feels like doing, great. But the speculation that she's going to lose money is ridiculous. She is bigger than women's basketball right now. She is it.
I've had conversations with people around the country. If you were to go to 100 people in LA or New York City and say, tell me which name you recognize more, Jaden Daniels or Caitlin Clark? It's going away for her. Jaden Daniels only won the Heisman Trophy, but you could say the same thing with Caleb Williams, who won it the year before and probably be the first NFL draft pick. Her name recognition is off the charts. And I say, enjoy this while it lasts, because it's not going to last forever. I mean, she's going to decide what she wants to do. She doesn't need me or you to pick for her. But my gosh, she would be going out on a high this year, and she will take her star to the WNBA. The NBA won't make her a star. And she's like, Joe Namath was that way in 65. He legitimized the AFL, forced the merger, basically, was the biggest star in the sport. You can talk about Michael Jordan. The one that actually she probably reminds me the most of is Tiger Woods.
We were talking about that last night. My son and I were talking about like people that are, just bigger than the sport.
Yeah. And, and their personalities could not be more different. But what she has done for women's sports and women's basketball is like what Tiger has done, when he won the Masters. It was just like, this vibrant, young, completely different type of individual doing these types of things. Everybody wanted to be like him, and now everybody wants to be like Caitlin. And it's transcendent, it's refreshing, and it's exciting. But she is she's an Iowa girl through and through. And she may only have 2.5, maybe 3 more months left. You know what? Celebrate it and brace it. She's going to lose a game. They're going to lose a game at some point. But
could be that one at Ohio State.
Yeah, right. Or it could be Saturday. But, for all we know. But I will say this. Enjoy it while it lasts, because once it's over, it's over. And we've never seen anything like this again. Frankly, Rob, we've had the last several years, we've had some unbelievable athletes across the University of Iowa. Spencer Lee, Luca Garza, Keegan Murray, Megan Gustafson, lots of football players, Torrey Taylor and Cooper DeJean, the most recent. As much as they've all been awesome and arguable for Mount Rushmore status, they're not Caitlin Clark. She is different. And so enjoy this while it lasts. We've never seen anything like her before, and we won't again.
And if you are at the biggest grocery store chain in the state today, you'll be able to find Caitlin's Crunch Time. They look like they're Frosted Flakes. Is that what is that what they're designed after?
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah. So yes, she has her own cereal now.
Caitlin's Crunch Time, so yeah,
I'm gonna have to get a box if I go to the store today. The youngest has already asked. So
yeah, I'm gonna have to go there too. So
yes, we'll report back next week for those that don't have access to the Caitlin Crunch Time. Scott and I will give our reviews on next week's Hotspot podcast after we purchase some. Let's flip over to the men's side, Scott. We talked about it last week, how big the Rutgers game was for Iowa, and got a little dicey there at the end, but was able to pull that off, get into the win column, 1-3 now in Big Ten play. Tomorrow night, a late start, 8:30 Central Time here in Iowa City. Again, we talked about the weather, so we'll see what type of crowd is there and what type of support they get. It's a Friday night. Kids are still on break. Going to be tough to get people in there. Nebraska I would call it an upstart Nebraska team. It seems like they figured things out. Fred's transfer portal affinity is kind of coming together now. Finally, he's had trouble getting a team together chemistry wise. I was watching the Purdue game the other night where they beat number 1 ranked Purdue in Lincoln. And they've got pieces that fit well together finally for Fred. And that's going to be a challenge tomorrow night for Iowa. This is the type of game, though, that Iowa needs to win, needs to beat a quality opponent at home in conference play. Won't be easy, but Iowa's had plenty of time to get ready for this one, having all week off till tomorrow night.
Yeah. The Rutgers game, I looked at it as the most important game of the season because when you're 0-3, and they were last year, they needed to win that game. They did. They played well enough. Rutgers isn't great yet. Next year, I think they're going to be great. But the way Peyton Sanford played that game, I thought was, especially in the second half, and Tony Perkins was really, terrific. But this is a different Nebraska team, as we saw. They crush Indiana, they blow out Purdue, which was number 1 in the country. What I find fascinating is the mental part of this, the mindset of both teams going into this game. I mean, how does Nebraska handle success?
Exactly.
Do you, when they go on the, after beating Purdue, do they go in, oh, we've got this team, we're going to go win, and then they struggle on the road? And how does Iowa handle it, from a mental standpoint? Like, okay, we've had a week off, we're rested, we're ready to go out and let's get, let's beat them down. And so I think you've got that contrast, which I think will be really impactful. But, to me, this would be as big of a statement for Nebraska to go on the road and beat a team like Iowa in its home, and kind of cement the fact that it's not just a team that can get up for home games. And then for Iowa, this is a really impactful game as far as it needs to prove that it can take steps forward, because Minnesota's not a slouch now. I mean, they won they're 3-1 in the Big Ten, and they play them next. So you look at this stretch after an 0-3 start, and you think, okay, they've got to, they've got to win some of these games. And this one to me is really pivotal on how we look at this season, because after this game, you play at Minnesota, you play Purdue. Things can spiral out of control very quickly if you don't get a handle on it.
Yeah, and it's tough to win on the road in this league. It is. We talked about the women's side. It's tough to win on the road. It's the same here. And, you saw Rutgers lose here and then go home and beat Indiana. Now, Indiana's not a great team by any means this year, but that's still, a quality win. Michigan State and Purdue have lost. Both have lost at Nebraska and Northwestern.
Yeah.
Both of those teams you think are two of the better teams in the league. Both of them have lost on the road to two teams I think that are pretty good in Nebraska and Northwestern, but historically you're like, wow, they lost. That's just goes to show you there's a little bit more balance in the league now, and it's harder to win on the road, which puts, even to your point, Scott, even more of an onus tomorrow night to win that game, because you would think, okay, Nebraska looks like it's better this year. If we lose to them at home, well, they've already beaten some really good teams, and we'll just go on the road and beat Minnesota.
Yeah.
That's not, you really need to protect your home court in this league.
The floor has risen in this league, and it looked, and we, at the beginning of the season, we always look at it. Okay, where do they fit? And, Iowa was somewhere, I don't know, 10th, I think, picked for the beginning of the season for the most part. And people are, oh, they're going to be better than that. I'm like, but there's really not a lot of difference between 5 and 12 usually. I mean, it's a couple of big shots here. It's an injury here. It's whatever. But now when you're looking at, Minnesota looked like going in, it was going to be the worst team in the league. Nebraska historically has been among the worst. Penn State has been among the worst. So you figure, well, those three will be in the bottom, and then a couple other teams will have bad luck, and Iowa will grow, and blah, blah, blah. No, you look at the bottom of the league, they could beat the top of the league. When you've got Rutgers, which has been, it's under Steve Peichel, has been really competitive, and then Michigan State was 1-3, so Iowa's in there. Maryland has been historically really good, and it's not. Michigan looks poor, but Michigan beat Iowa by 10 at home. So this really looks like to me that Iowa's got to be, you got to win these games, because you gave up your mulligan when you lost to Michigan at home. Mm-hmm. And now if you lose to Nebraska and you go to Minnesota, they hate you. They say it.
It's not a secret.
No. Yeah, they don't fake it. They make it. So, but, if you go 1-5 and then, oh, by the way, then you got Purdue after that. Yeah, this season can spiral off to the point where you're playing on the first day and that's your only game in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, ideally you want to win tomorrow night and then get that one back at Minnesota. Like you said, you kind of connect that to the Michigan game and say, all right, we gave one away against Michigan at home, but we got one on the road. That's kind of what you hope for. You get to 3-3. Purdue comes to town. Purdue's lost at Northwestern and Nebraska, as we've said, so it's not an unwinnable game. It's just obviously going to be difficult to win. Looking at the net rankings, Scott, Iowa checks in this morning at 67 in the net rankings, and Nebraska is at 41. So that's a good win for Iowa if you get that tomorrow night. Get it at home.
Yeah, for sure. And 67 isn't bad for this team and where it sits right now. I mean, they've lost some games. They've been blown out on the road a lot of times. But I think overall, if you could sit there and if you could get some of these games back, you can inch yourself back into territory because the Big Ten. I wouldn't say is a great conference this year,
No,
but I would say it's a deep conference.
mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of competitive teams, and you just got to navigate your way through it. There's going to be a lot of wins, and there's going to be a lot of losses, but you just got to make sure you can win the games that are winnable. And I think this is certainly one of them. Now, if Nebraska plays the way it did, dictates tempo, against Purdue, it's going to be very, very difficult to win even at home against them. So, one of the things I'm concerned about, Rob, and after watching it on Saturday was what kind of crowd are they going to get? I mean, we're talking about
the weather.
Yeah, I mean the women's game. It's weird how that has completely flipped. The women are so popular that people will pay $270 a ticket to go see them. The men, 9,200 people tickets. At least that was the enlisted attendance on Saturday for an 11 o'clock game at home again on a nice weather day. There wasn't any problems there, and against a Big Ten opponent, and yet, I would guess probably 7,500 probably showed up. A lot of times it's.
Were you there?
Yeah, I was there.
Okay, I was in Cedar Falls at club volleyball, so I was watching on TV up there between matches, and you could tell it wasn't, there were plenty of seats available, as they say.
Yeah. I would guess it was probably half full, and 90, when they list 92, that you always subtract in games like this, you always subtract at least 1,000. And that's really unfortunate, I would say, for this program and where it's building. But when you've got weather, you're fighting apathy. We're not going to sugarcoat it. There's an apathetic fan base, and there's a lot to like. I think there's a lot to like about this team. I think they're a year away from being good, but when you see guys like Owen Freeman out there, and you see Peyton Sanford and some of the others, I mean, Ben Krickey's is a stopgap, no question, but there's a lot I like, but I think the fans have kind of checked out, and that's the worst part, really, when it comes to a sport. It's not being, love and hate are the same. They're just different emotions. Apathy is the opposite of both, and that's where you run the risk, because it's not going to, you can't just flip that switch back on as we've seen before.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what it's going to take with this team this season to get asses back in the seats, and we'll kind of have to wait and see how tomorrow night goes, and then obviously Purdue coming. You would think Purdue would bring fans in as well, but you never know. It's January, the weather. I think if you're looking glass half full, as Scott said, Owen Freeman has been a revelation. Five or six Freshman of the Week awards.
Yeah.
The Iowa record for that, and he's just the motor and the tenacity he plays with is very, very easy to root for. That's the type of, it's Luka in a way, but Owen's a little bit more explosive and athletic than Luka.
Yeah.
Luka's was more skilled.
Oh, no question.
So that's kind of the give and take. So they're not the same player, but that same type of energy that's infectious. It gets teammates going. It gets the fans going. And then the other thing that I would say is the schedule was front loaded in a lot of ways. Not that there's going to be easy games going forward, but I think it's safe to say that Wisconsin and Purdue are two of the better teams in the league, and Iowa's already played both of them on the road. That helps a little bit and puts the record in perspective, but you still have to move forward and continue to get better. And I think we're seeing that. I think Freeman is getting more comfortable. Josh Dix, I think, is playing a little bit better. DeSante Bone. Everybody's getting it looks like a little bit more comfortable, but you have to get even more comfortable quicker now because you don't have time.
Yeah, it's any time of the time where you try to acclimate yourself, that's all over with. That's December, that's November. Now it's about coming out and winning these games. And and then there are teams when you start to look down the schedule that may have looked more difficult and daunting and now are less so. Some of them are on the road. I mean, after this game, they play 3 out of 5 on the road, but at Minnesota, that's gettable. That doesn't mean you can walk in and win the game, but it's gettable. Purdue at home, that's not going to be easy, as we know, but it's at home. If you're going to Mackey, you just chalk it up as another loss, like you did. Luckily, you already had to do that.
Happened.
Yeah. Maryland at home. Maryland is not a good team this year, but they're not a cakewalk either. At Michigan and at Indiana, yes, you lost by 10 to Michigan, but that's probably the one loss where you look at it and go, God, I can't believe we lost that game. And going back to it, if there's any moment that Fran should regret, he probably would never admit it, but it's getting tossed out of that game because his team really needed him. At that point when they were starting to teeter, they're a young team at home and you walk away and get kicked out. That's something that shouldn't have happened. At Indiana, they've had a lot of success at Indiana over the years. And Indiana is kind of like Iowa. They're really teetering on, are they going to be good or not? Ohio State at home. Yeah, there's a home. At Penn State, Minnesota, at Maryland. I mean, all those games are coin flip games if they continue to improve. But that's why the next two, though, are so impactful because it's such a different mindset when you're 1-5 versus 3-3. And it's not, you just play more relaxed and pressure free. At 1-5, that's where teams break apart. That's where teams play desperate. That's where they don't necessarily play very smart. And that's where I think Iowa, has some. That's why tomorrow night is such an impactful game, Rob.
Tomorrow night, 8:30, Carver Hawkeye Arena. Tickets remain. So get over there. If you can get through the weather, give it a go. It's an important game for Iowa. Hawkeyes could use your support. Going to hit on wrestling quick here. Scott and I haven't had a ton of time to get into the wrestling season yet, but wanted to mention Iowa is at Nebraska tomorrow night, Friday, January the 12th. That is a 6:30 start to the duel. Iowa's 3, Nebraska is 6. That is on the Big Ten Network. And then Monday night, Scott, kind of neat. They're doing a Monday night at Carver Hawkeye Arena against Minnesota. Minnesota is ranked 10th, and that is at 7 o'clock on the Big Ten Network. So couple important duels for the Iowa team. Tom Brand spoke with the media, I believe it was on Tuesday, talked about various things about his lineup. He was asked, he can't talk specifically about recruits, so the AJ Ferrari, he can only say so much about him, just in generalizations. He said that they don't anticipate adding anybody for the second semester at this moment. So there's the caveat of that. And we talked about this last week with the situation at the Soldier Salute and, the due diligence of Iowa's wrestling coaches and interim athletic director Beth Getz in vetting that and making sure if that happens, there are guidelines in place. But at this point, it seems like, and obviously that has ramifications with his brothers too. So that's a situation to monitor going forward. It doesn't seem like a decision was made, even though the kid has officially visited here recently.
Yeah, this is what they say, stay tuned because just don't know what's going to happen here on the the big picture. I think there's some issues, obviously there's got to be concerns with AJ Ferrari, which also has ramifications for his brothers. And, that kind of Iowa wrestling has never shied away from passionate, over the top, sometimes straying over the line type of behavior. But this based on his past, it really calls in a question. Can you handle this? Do you want to handle this? Because it's not so much what he does on the mat, which is, great at times, but it's also problematic. But it's what does he do off the mat, and how does he integrate himself with the team? It's not just about finishing second or first in March. It's everything else. And so, what does Beth think? Well, how does Tom Brands think? Can he handle that? Can Terry Brands handle that? Or is it just too much of a headache? That's interesting, and then as you said, kind of the way he chose his words, it does bring some questions up. So
Yeah, the door is open. We just don't know how much it's open. If it may be a sliver. It could be more than that. I think, as Scott said, stay tuned. It's a developing situation, as is a name we're familiar with here in Iowa City, Ben Keeter, Iowa City High, world champion, U20, has transitioned from his football season to wrestling, and is now in the room working out. Tom was I got the sense in listening. I wasn't on the Zoom, but I went back and watched it. He was, Tom is smart. He's very media savvy. He wasn't going to get painted into a corner of, this is what I need to see from Ben for him to get into the lineup. He was more kind of less specific and just said, we're watching him. We're watching him get used to being in the room. We're watching him get used to being back on the mat. I mean, it's a big difference between going out there and playing linebacker and getting on a mat at two high level Power 5. I mean, Iowa wrestling is among the top programs in the country, and Iowa football is a top 25 program. So you're talking about a very high level, something we're not used to seeing somebody do, Scott. So again, stay tuned. It's a developing situation.
I had a conversation with Seth Wallace one time on the field about Ben, because I kind of, we'd all heard those rumors that once everything happened with Tony Cassiope, that he was just going to go over and do wrestling and then worry about football later. And it was actually the opposite, that he was there every single day for football, and he wasn't going to do anything wrestling wise until football was over. So he's got a lot of work to do in that front. However, his work to be able to go on the mat and compete is a little different than everybody else in the country. So I think the
starting point is a little bit ahead of most people.
Exactly. So, I think in some ways, I don't know. I haven't looked at the schedule, and I'm kind of trying to dig my way to the surface on wrestling because it's still kind of football season in my mind. But, are there any more unattached tournaments? That's probably where you'd want to see. How does he compete unattached? Like in the debut tournament and some of those others. I mean, that could have already happened and people are laughing at me right now, but I don't know.
I wish I could help you. I can't help you either.
Yeah. So, but anyway, if he can compete in an unattached tournament and see how he does, and, and if he's the best guy for that position, they're going to throw him out there. I mean, they need to. I know they want to redshirt him and all, but yeah, I don't know. I think you just kind of go with it. Anyway, when he comes out, he's automatically a recognizable name. People know who he is. And if he gets a chance, kind of like when Spencer Lee finally had the red shirt taken off him after his ACL. I remember going to a wrestling press conference right before that, and he's, Tom Brand's first thing he said is, Spencer Lee is free. And he went out there and stuck a kid in 30 seconds, and voila, here, the legend goes on. And I think Ben Keeter probably has that same type of ability, that once it happens, all right, look for him. He's going to go out there and compete at a very high level.
And he's trying to overtake Bradley Hill, a redshirt freshman from Bettendorf, who is 12-4 wrestling heavyweight this year. He is unranked. So, but he's done a nice job. So, and Tom was very complimentary of him in his press conference the other day. So it's not like, and I don't think that's good for your room either, to just have a guy walks in off the football field and you're in the lineup. You gotta earn some things over there. But Ben Keeter's he's built a little bit different in a lot of ways. And I would not be at all surprised to see him eventually get into the lineup at some point this season at heavyweight. You have to think about redshirting, but with him, I'm not sure you're worried about that, because he's a two-sport athlete, I think. And you need if he can make you better, you put him in there.
Yeah. After what happened with the gambling situation, you just kind of, let's just get going. Let's do what you got to do. If he can go out and let's say it gets to Friday night, you take those points, and Friday night meaning the semifinals of the national tournament. And he's capable of that. I don't know about winning it, but he certainly didn't have any problems in high school. And he certainly did all right when it came to a lot of the national tournaments that he was in. So I think, and of course, in an international forum, he's been great too. So I think you roll it out, you go with what you got. And this year is important too. So.
Big weekend for wrestling, as well as the men's and women's basketball teams. Again, Friday night, tomorrow night, January 12th at Nebraska, 6:30 start to that duel on the Big Ten Network. And then Monday night at Carver Hawkeye Arena against number 10 Minnesota. Obviously a rivalry match there. That's at 7 p.m. also on the Big Ten Network. Wrestling is sold out like women's basketball, so you're going to have to hunt for tickets for that as well. But well worth your time if you've not been to a wrestling match, and that's probably who we're talking to, because everybody who's gone knows what the environment's like. But definitely a fun atmosphere. So if you're in the area, you never know. With this weather and things, there could be some seats open up, so check that out. Definitely event and something as a Hawkeye fan you want to check out. So, all right, we're going to take a break here. I got to read. We're going to take a break, and we'll come back and dive into some football. Let me pull up my read. I'm not messing with this today because my mind has been a little scrambled this week. So, want to have the read. Support comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited for the great work they're doing in the community and for the support of the podcast. We're going to hear from a few more of our supporters, and Scott and I will be back on the other side to talk some football. We are back here on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast on Hawk Fanatic. I am Rob Howe. That is Scott Doctorman. We do this weekly, Thursday mornings when schedules allow. We'll let you know if we're switching anything up, but hopefully we're settling in now after a busy December and Scott being on the road for the bowl game and such. Speaking of the bowl game and speaking of the Iowa football program, we'll dive in there. Scott, I was going to kind of dive into your, excuse me, offensive and defensive depth charts. We've run kind of long here a little bit on the basketball and wrestling, so we may table that to next week, but we can kind of talk about that a little bit less specific in terms of guys coming back. We now know who's returning, pretty much everybody except for Cooper.
Yeah, what an amazing development for this program. I mean, I targeted, 8 sixth-year guys are coming back, and then you throw on Luke Lachey as well. Cooper DeJean, and Cooper DeJean though is a first-round draft pick. You just you got to be realistic with that. But for the possibility of starting 3 new linebackers versus bringing them all back, because Kyler Fisher is coming back too, to have 4 of the 5 returnees in the secondary where you could have had 1, that is unbelievable. When you're looking at, the offensive line, the opening day offensive line is all intact from last year. Your quarterback is back. Your Mackey Award finalist, potentially guy, and Luke Lachey is back. This is massive. Now they are at 91 scholarships. I have them at.
It's 91. Okay.
Yeah.
I had it at 90 the other day, but I trust your math.
Yeah. That's probably
is that with Fisher.
Yeah.
Okay. That's, I think I hadn't, when I added it up, I hadn't realized he was coming back.
Yeah. He he was one I asked about. I asked somebody, and he's like, "Yeah, he announced. He didn't really even need to announce it. He was just like, I'm coming back." He said that months ago. So,
Okay.
so yeah, he's coming back. So they're at 91, which means they got to trim 6 at a minimum. And then you also look at, last week they were trying to get in the quarterback market, and they need a receiver. They need to get at least one. So you're looking at probably 8 or 9 guys that'll probably have to be subtracted. That's not that's doable. That's normal. That's organic in some ways. I mean, I look at a couple of players that have really struggled with injuries. That's where you have that medical scholarship conversation and say, we're not sure it's in your best interest to compete in football here, and we'll continue to pay for your education, but we're going to put you on medical scholarship. And then it's up to them as to whether or not they want to continue, or if they want to, and do that at Iowa, or if they want to go somewhere else and play. Then you get, and then I would say I could see 3 to 4 probably in that range. And then you're looking at about another 2 to 4 where, like running back, there's 7 scholarship running backs. Do you think all 5 that played this year are going to be happy at the end of spring football? Somebody's going to be saying, well, maybe I should go somewhere else, and maybe 2 somebodies. So to me, I don't think it's going to be. There may be 1 or 2 of those, oh man, that really sucks moves, but I think more than likely it's going to be fairly organic how they get down, because this always happens. I mean, players always leave, so it's not unusual.
And for those folks that aren't aware, they don't need to be there until camp. So
Yeah.
there's all this time. There's, winter conditioning, and then there's spring ball, and then there's another transfer portal window in May. And, there's a lot of time. There's it's almost 7 months roughly to get through this. So, and we talk about this a lot, Scott. Some guys know kind of where they are just in the hierarchy, depth chart, but sometimes you go through spring ball and you get a better picture of where you are, and then you decide, okay, maybe I don't see a path here.
Yeah.
And it's just, as you said, organically, you just have to go through the process to get there. And you can have injuries in spring. You don't know.
Right. I mean, to me, I always look at it. The crossroads are, if you're entering your junior year and you're not on the depth chart, you've got to really seriously evaluate your future. And that doesn't mean you can't get there. It just means that, I don't know if I should even name some of these guys, but let's take some injury guys and just look at it for what it is. Mike Wyslinski is a guy that's been on the depth chart, but he's had serious injuries last couple of years. Griffin Little really hasn't ever been able to get off it. He started off as a defensive lineman. Heck, he was given a scholarship offer as a freshman at Bettendorf, and now he's entering his junior year. Jeff Bowie has been bad luck, and injured. Zach Tweet has been bad luck and injured. Devin Hilson switched positions. Those guys I look at as, you got to make a push now probably in your career to get at your career where you want it to be. And, and maybe that's at Iowa. Maybe that's, hey, I just had some bad luck. I can do this, and I'm going to do this. And then voila, next year, somebody else, they pop in and they're great. Or it could be, I just don't see it happening here. Those are the guys that you kind of look at initially as, medical, or is it, whatever. And then there are others that are kind of in that same boat. And then you're going to find there's going to be a player or two that maybe will surprise you in the end that just says, what, I'm going to quit, or I'm going to go somewhere else closer to home, or I'm just not progressing the way I want to. I don't see this as really dangerous territory, and with that, I do think they need to probably get a quarterback. And I think they need to get at least 1 or 2 wide receivers. Maybe they get the kind of the Charlie Jones factor, where here's a guy, that we don't have a scholarship, but you can earn one while you get here, and you played well at Buffalo, and that certainly could happen too at the end of spring. So I don't think there's a lot of desperation here at this point.
No, and we saw it in December, Scott, with Antonio Thompson, Brandon Dis Fernandez. Deontay Vines,
Yeah.
even. Those are guys that could help Iowa next year, but they were looking for more playing time. And
Yeah.
Terrio said that the other day when there was some asshole on Twitter that had to have a commentary on him going to Central Michigan, right?
Western
Western
Michigan.
Michigan. I always get those confused. But you know, and that's the situation we're talking about here moving forward. That can happen in spring ball where guys are like, okay, I'm stuck here, especially, when just at a position, linebacker.
Yeah.
There were guys last year thinking, all right, my chance is going to be 2024 when Higgins and
Yeah.
Jackson and Fisher are gone. Now
Yeah.
those guys aren't gone. So do you want to burn another year behind them, or do you want to go somewhere and maybe get some time?
Yeah, exactly. And, like Jaden Harrell to me is probably next guy in the middle. Carson Shire, they think very highly of, but is he going to be able to press through and be able to do that? He's had some injury issues.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, number 3 might be Jackson Rexroth, who's a walk-on.
Right.
And then you got the 3 newbies coming in who are all they're on the fast track. They're at Disney. They were like here, and everybody else is here. So then you do look at that group of players. Keeter's kind of in a different realm because I think he could still probably move to like D end, if he bulks up in a certain way. But Aiden Hall, Landon Van Kekerix, Jaden Montgomery, Zach Tweed are kind of in that. How much are Jaden has played a lot of special teams, but can these guys move up? And maybe they can, and I'm not trying to sell them short or anything. It's just kind of the reality of the situation that they've got 5 guys ahead of them already, and then they've got some guys behind them that are on the fast track. So, where do they go from here? That's a big question.
Roster management, man, it's crazy. It is crazy, crazy, crazy now, and we'll kind of just see how it goes. I think, again, this is a unique situation, Scott, just because of the COVID years. I think it kind of just changes it. These things won't, I don't think, be as prevalent moving forward where you're up into the 90s. I think it's a special situation.
Yeah, for sure. You've only really got one more year where it kind of taps into that, if at the most. So this is the last big year for Iowa when it comes to this. So yeah, the roster management's going to be an issue, and the next time is going to be when they're actually hunting in the portal, right. As opposed to this, and then you're going to be we're only at 79, and so we better scholarship a couple walk-ons because they've actually got walk-ons that could probably get scholarships that are good enough. I think Van Wetzinga is probably in that ballpark. I think Rexroth's in that ballpark. But right now, but they've only got like 10 real seniors, and then they've got 8 super seniors. So once all these guys kind of move on, then that'll really change it. But that's where roster management's the most fascinating part of this sport right now. The transfer portal has given us something to talk about all year long, and it's the free agency that people never got to talk about. I remember 15 years ago, you're kind of like stuck, hoping for a JUCO guy. A transfer had to sit out for a year, and that only happened every now and then. Now you've got, oh wow, look at all this. So. Yeah, I'm interested though by probably the freshmen and sophomores, how they compete in the spring, and just to see where they fit in this big picture right now.
Another thing to note is only 2 true freshmen enrolling this semester, so that gives all the rest of the class won't get here till the summer. So again, that gives guys that are trying to figure out where they stand a chance this conditioning portion of the year and then into spring ball to determine kind of where they are at and if this is where they want to continue. So that's a low number, only 2 true freshmen, I think. Yeah. Iowa traditionally doesn't have a ton of guys, but it's Gavin Hoffman and the punter, right?
Right. Yeah. Restaken. Yeah.
So obviously we're important to get the punter in here. And I like Gavin Hoffman a ton. I think he has a chance to be really good. And him getting an early start will help him as well. We talked about this before recording. Not a lot to talk about in terms of the offensive coordinator, Scott. It's just everybody's just kind of waiting on the captain to make his decision.
Yeah, that's it's starting to get into the anxious period. I think for fans, they've kind of rode this wave where they've been really anxious about it. Then they've kind of slowed down. Kirk said, "Well, it'll be second to third week of January." Now we're in the second week, and then you start to see, three of the greatest coaches in football history all either be forced out or retire in the last day, with Nick Saban, of course, but Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll, and what's going to happen with Jim Harbaugh in the next coming days. I mean, there's so much uncertainty, and then here's Iowa. Yeah, we've known since October 30th we'll have a different coordinator, but here we are. So
I know Ryan Grubb's name has popped up again this week. I'm not seeing that. Maybe if Kellen DeBoer ends up being the Alabama coach, but why would Ryan Grubb not go to Alabama?
Well, if Kalen DeBoer goes to Alabama, I think Ryan Grubb is the head coach at Washington. This has been kind of a pipe dream I've heard a lot about, and even people inside have kind of told me a little bit about, hey, this is a guy we kind of like, but you're talking about a guy who's a $2 million coordinator anyway at the very start. Why would he leave Washington for Iowa? Well, he's got Iowa roots. Okay. But how much control would he have over Iowa's offense? And again, why would you leave a situation that you've helped build, in order to go somewhere like that? And then there's the thought of, well, if you fix Iowa, you could write your ticket anywhere, including Iowa in the future. But I don't see it. I just don't think it's realistic. So, the names that continue to pop up, to me, I'm going to continue to mention them until they've been eliminated officially. Joe Philbin, Paul Christ, they're still there. It's just a matter of, is there anybody else that kind of fits in? Does Tommy Rees from Alabama, does he fit in? And then how does he fit in? Because we always wonder about Kirk and micromanagement of the offense, and because it is Kirk's offense.
And that's not a secret to the people that are out there.
No.
That are, potential candidates. They're not dumb. They look, not only is Iowa looking for an offensive coordinator, but those offensive coordinators saying, well, what am I getting what am I getting into? What is the setup when I go into this program?
Yeah, and a lot of them want their own style of play. They want to be able to do whatever they want to do. And a lot of it's whether it's air raid or it's, not necessarily complementary in nature. It's about being offensive. And that goes contrary to what Kirk wants to do. And how much of it is it us embellishing? I don't know. I mean, I can talk out of both sides of my mouth on this, but I think it's, it is real. So if it's somebody who knows him or somebody that has a similar shared philosophy, I think it's going to go a lot easier to consider. And Chris, to me, is probably the one that makes the most sense, but, can he get there? And, last year they decided to put together, I think it was $7 million for their assistant coaches pool. You're probably going to have to jump that already, because if somebody comes in, that was with Brian making $9K or $900K that get cut to $850. So it really has to grow by almost $1 million every year from here henceforth. So I don't know. It's hopefully it happens soon, because I get tired of answering these questions when I really don't know which path it's taking.
Yeah, hopefully by next week's Hotspot, we're able to discuss the new offensive coordinator. Philbin's been my guy. I kind of heard his name month and a half ago, and he makes a lot of sense to me for the reasons you said, just kind of the relationship. He knows the structure. He knows what he's getting himself into. But also, like you said, I think Chris and Philbin look like the two guys that fit what the mold of what Kirk is looking for.
Right. And I know what the concerns are with both of them. And Philbin's concerns have been beaten like a pinata for a long time, and there's a lot to like. What people are saying. Well, he never really called plays. Well, he's an offensive coordinator in the NFL for a long time. He worked with Aaron Rodgers. He worked with Brett Favre. He worked with Mike McCarthy. He set up the game plan.
Right.
Mike McCarthy just wanted to actually call the plays, but he had a lot of influence over those plays. He's on the headset. He's the one saying, Mike, we should do this. Okay. And then blah, 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 blah. That they work together. It's not I don't know. And this kind of frustrates me about the fan base of the team we cover is sometimes they think there's Iowa, the NFL, and major college football, and then everybody else. Like somebody would want to leave, well, he was an offensive coordinator for a Super Bowl champion, but that's not good enough for Iowa. Give me a break. God,
he's overqualified.
Yeah.
I think he and Chris are both, if you look at their resumes, you could make an argument that they're both overqualified.
Exactly. They've had, Chris is 67-26 at Wisconsin, out of their 8 matchups, 1 at Pitt. He's 5-3 against Kirk. And his passing system was what changed Iowa to go to a 4-2-5. To me, the passing system is what has to change.
Agreed.
The run system, they can work through the tweaks. They can do things because you're going to have to run the ball no matter what. The passing system is it just needs scrap from day one. And once they do that, it doesn't matter who designs it. Just do it, space the field better, and have better route trees and all those types of concepts. Once that happens, it's not like one person's they're all gonna make bad calls on 3rd and 4 once in a while, and that includes Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan.
Right.
Now I know Kyle Shanahan is thinking about quitting the 49ers job to become Iowa's OC, but he's going to wait till the playoffs are over, which is why Kirk is waiting, right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
to wrap this conversation up for the week, Scott, the most comforting aspect of the guys who are coming back for Iowa is that the defense will again be, barring injuries, and we certainly hope those don't happen, the defense should be as good as it was this year, which was the 4th best scoring defense in the country, if not better, next year. That gives you a little bit of a parachute, a cushion, a landing, because it's whoever they hire for an offensive coordinator, there are going to be growing pains. There just will be. So this gives you a little bit of a security blanket. I'm throwing out a bunch of cliches here, but at least you have that next year while you're transitioning.
Yeah. And I think, for me, it's, yes, first of all, they were first in the country in yards per play allowed, and that's by playing the 4th most snaps of any defense in the country. That's out of this world. Just unreal. But there's going to be growing pains on offense. But, my fear is that maybe they improve incrementally, but it's just enough to have the flip from this year. This year they were 5-1 and games decided by a touchdown or less. It could go the other way. Mm-hmm. And that happens a lot at Iowa. But if they improve more than incrementally, then they could be a juggernaut. Then they could be one of the top 2 or 3 or 4 teams in the Big Ten and get in the playoff. So I think there's a lot to like, but having this defense all return, having 6 starters that had the option to return for a 6th year or not, and they all decided to come back, and then you throw on Xavier Wampa and Y.A. Black, Ethan Hurkett, Deontay Craig, you're going, oh wow, this team's, Aaron Graves, this team's got a chance to be special on that side of the ball. So that's going to help prop up this team when they, play Iowa State in the very beginning. And they're, but then the other side to me is quarterback.
Yep.
Quarterback has to be fixed. If it's not, this team win 7 or 8 games and it'll feel just as hollow as 10 did this year.
And it's unknown, really. I mean, we're hoping for the best with Cade and being able to get healthy and stay healthy, but it's an unknown. And that's why Scott was talking about maybe adding somebody in the portal as well at that position. We'll see how this goes, man. It's nonstop. There is no more off season. The off season is the is part of the season now. It's just, it doesn't stop. And we'll be here to talk about it on the Hotspot. We'll be back next week. Thursday of next week in the morning. We'll recap what we see in basketball. We've got the 2 wrestling meets we previewed a little bit in this podcast. We'll certainly have more football to talk about. So until then, we appreciate everybody listening. Thank you so much to our sponsors, and we will talk to you folks